Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Welcome, everybody. Barry and I were just saying that bridging our political divides is it's very apt, considering we did the spiritual divorce last week. And I did reference that I had apologized last week and had not received a response, and it was directly to do with this. And you know, living in America, it is just, well, I think it's global. I don't think it's just America, but for sure there is, you know, clearly there's tribalism, there is massive divides between the right and the left. But interestingly, there's also divides within. You know, what I'm noticing myself is that, you know, I have family in the UK that are Republicans, and that's are rather conservatives. That's how I grew up, in a conservative household, sort of. And not that my mum was conservative in the true sense of the word, but politically, it was a conservative household. And oops, I'm so sorry, my dog just barked.
It's okay.
He sounds bigger. His bark is bigger than his bite. He doesn't. So
which may be true politically too.
Let's move on. So
yes,
interestingly, within parties, I'm seeing that not only do I differ between my, you know, right-leaning family members, but also within my left-leaning family members. I am not far left enough for some of them, apparently. I am too towards the center. And that's what I was mentioning last week about having reached out and just said, listen, you know, we see something differently here, but can we not let this interfere in our relationship? And that is something that many of us are dealing with right now. How to maintain our friendships, our relationships with our family members. Thank goodness my partner and I are, I would say, 99.9% in alignment with our political views. So there's no discourse there. But it really is, it's a challenge. I see it all the time. I see it with friends I've known for 30 years that we just have to agree to disagree. So
it's interesting because being single on the dating apps, and I definitely have seen more than a few women putting in their profiles, if you voted for so and so, don't even reach out. Like that sort of thing. Most one in particular. But what I want to speak to, because something said this triggers something for me, is that it's true that we find our tribe within the tribe of one particular leaning. It's not just, oh, you're on that side, period. That's the way it is. And I imagine the idea of, like, if you imagine a yardstick like 36 inches wide, and if you're not within a millimeter of somebody else, you're not in the same belief system. Doesn't matter how wide the spectrum is, you got to be right on top of each other's viewpoint, or it doesn't count. So even though you both may be centrists, but because one leans slightly one way and the one leans slightly the other, it's so challenging. I've taken to listening to a radio show on NPR called Left, Right, and Center, which is actually based out of KCRW, the West Side. And Left, Right, and Center means they have somebody who's the moderator, who's a centrist, and then they have usually the same two people, but sometimes they have guest people in, who one's on the left, one's on the right, and they have a very civil conversation. You know, the slogan for the show is civilized yet provocative. And the fact that they can have this conversation and they're friends, it's like, this is the example of what a relationship of any sort can be, when you have differing views, but you can speak civilly. The challenge with most political agendas is the righteousness, is that I'm right, you're wrong. So it's very hard to have a relationship of any sort with somebody who says to you that your view is wrong, therefore you don't matter, or you're not right. And so the way to bridge out, the simplest way, and this is a very simple answer to bridge political divides, is to not make somebody else wrong, period. Yeah. If you do that alone, you change the landscape.
Yeah, exactly. When I was thinking about the title for the show, I was thinking, would you rather be right or in a relationship? Because and it's so interesting, because as we were saying, it's like, you know, I accept that with, you know, I'm clearly on the left. I am left to center, but still left for sure.
Yeah.
And as I said, I have family members that are very to the right and not extremists, but on the right for sure. And I'm used to navigating that. I'm used to agreeing to disagree, agreeing to not talk about politics. I think what has surprised me was the family member that is much further to the left than I am, to the point where I do feel a bit like, gosh, has all the goodwill over the years, has all the commonalities, has that all been discarded because, as you said, I'm not fitting in with that tiny
Right.
parameter of what they see as right, righteous, whatever they description you want to give it. And and then I thought to myself, well, I'll be the bigger person and I'll just reach out and say,
Yep.
can we? And but for right now, they want to remain more more left than right in the sense of, but it's interesting, and I thought, well, I'm just doing it because I value the relationship, and I want to extend first to just say, hey, can we agree to disagree on this tiny area?
Yeah.
It's, so it certainly doesn't, from my perspective, but then again, I am older, so um, that it doesn't negate the closeness. It doesn't negate the love. It doesn't. It's just you
Right.
disagree on one small area, and can we move beyond that? And I'm sure that when they're ready, they will see that it's not worth having this big divide in the relationship because of a difference of opinion.
It used to be that political differences were so much further down the list of priorities than dietary requirements, health regimens, spiritual practices, religious beliefs. Yet it's now become like the top one because there's so much volatility and so much discord that we've seen in the media. And you're saying about how it's all over the world, but I think the United States has a particular spin and a particular bent on the volume of the voices in the media, which both is online as well as on television and radio, that is making it seem so it is much more right, wrong, divergent. And as you said, it isn't the be all and end all of life, but we seem to try and make it that important. And frankly, to be blunt, it is very overinflated because its reality is it doesn't affect us personally directly all the time. Yes, it does when we focus on it, but ultimately, most of the time, I was looking back on this recently. I was on a conversation with somebody yesterday that over the last 20 years or so, we've had in America political swings left and right, quite a lot over the last 20, 30 years. And the truth is, our personal lives haven't changed that dramatically. Yes, some things have changed slightly. Price of eggs may have gone up, price of fuel went down, whatever it was. But it didn't change our ability to have a nice life, like taking care of ourselves. There are some graduated things happening politically in this country where we're having challenges with homelessness and other things like that, which nobody's fixing. But that's not left or right particular opinion. That's just a lack of support. So the idea about bridging political divides is, and I'll say it this way, if we're willing to look at America in this example versus the whole world as a United States of America versus divided States of America, then how can we find the common ground? How can we meet each other to do things for the common good, like to have more housing, to have better roads, to have things change that we all benefit from? Because most of the time we spend our time sitting in the middle of this ditch, arguing with each other, getting nothing done. And yet the
So
truth is,
a lot of really interesting points. But I do want to, as you said, we both lived here around the same amount of time, 40 plus years. And yes, it's been, we've had Republicans, Democrats, we flip flop. It's almost that there seems to be this sort of feeling that of dissatisfaction with whoever's in, and they want
yep,
to try something new, which is that's a whole other show right there.
yes,
I feel the first time that my life is being impacted. And in the sense of, I have my nephew staying with me right now, and I wanted to go to the gay pride. He wanted to go. We were going to go to the gay pride in Hollywood, and
right,
um, for those of we are pre-recording the show, so for right now there are some demonstrations going on and some agitators that are creating um, a
just
very unfortunate situation, because what has happened is we now have the National Guard. We have it's just chaotic, So I chose not to go into Hollywood, even though I considered it to be very safe. And I felt that I wasn't in fear of anything within the parade, but knowing just a few miles away were the National Guard and the Marines. And I thought this could easily, our president, or actually not my president, but the president could actually, move some people over there if he felt like it. And I felt potential danger, not from the parade and who was going to be in the parade, but from a political choice that could have been made that could have really impacted myself and my nephew at this event. So I am feeling the impact more than I've ever done before of the choices that are being made. But again, as I say, when I say it's worldwide, I think it's far worse in America. I think it is. I think you know left-leaning people, right-leaning people in the rest of Europe. There's definitely a political divide, but I think there is a level of craziness that I'm experiencing here right now that is, I don't think that is worldwide by any means. I think there is something way out of control here. But again, going back to that bridging our political divides, if you can say to somebody, let's agree to disagree, or let's agree to not discuss this, that's the first step. But if they do insist on sharing their views, one of the helpful things to do is to be curious, not defensive, not argue your views, because clearly if they're not going to respect that healthy boundary of let's agree to disagree, let's not talk about this, and they're still going to push to talk about it, then they're obviously displaying that they don't have healthy boundaries. Whatever it takes two to argue, as they say. So don't get drawn into that back and forth. Literally just practice active listening. Be curious. Hear where they're coming from. You don't have to respond, because quite honestly, they're not interested in your response anyway. They just want to be right, and they want to push their views on you. Let them do it. It's fine. It's fine. Just they will run out of steam at some point. The conversation will move on. But if you start engaging and trying to convince somebody that hasn't respected the fundamental boundary of let's agree to disagree, let's not, talk about this, then there is no winning that argument. It's just escalate. So
Yeah. In fact, on that, I would say an invitation that you can offer somebody, if they are of a different viewpoint than yours, is they're willing to have an honest and kind, caring communication and conversation about this. Because the thing is, if they have a different viewpoint and you want to find out from them, you want to be curious, as you said, which I love. I think of Ted Lasso with the whole being curious. It's a great little scene. If you haven't seen that in the movie, look for that on YouTube. But the thing is that the opportunity to discover somebody's viewpoints and also for them to discover yours can be very healing. But you've almost got to set up the framework ahead of time. You got to set up the preamble saying, look, I know your viewpoint's different from mine. I'd like to know where you come from and why have these views? Because I'd like to share mine as well. Are you willing to have a conversation like that? Because if you can have that, not necessarily going to understand each other or accept each other, but at least you'll see the viewpoint from somebody else's perspectives, give you something to think about. And it is a way of bridging, not necessarily because bridging political divides isn't necessarily going to guarantee you're going to be kumbaya and everyone's going to be happy and everyone's going to be fine. It can just be a level of understanding and appreciation of somebody's viewpoint without changing anything of your own viewpoint. But it's a chance, an opportunity.
No, absolutely. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about somebody. I'm thinking of a few different things, and I was thinking about, again, my nephew. He was staying up in Northern California before he came down here, and he did go to a gay pride in Santa Rosa, and somebody came up to him, and I think just simply because he was attending, because he certainly, was not dressed in a way that would be like, as anyway. Yeah. They screamed in his face, "You're going to hell for being gay." And now that type of thing, there is no rationale there. There is no, can we hear each other's point of view? From my perspective, anyway, to go to that level of prejudice and hatred, it's like, no, just avoid those people. Seriously, they're not, as we talked about, they're not your tribe. It's not like a minor difference in viewpoint. From my perspective, that's an extreme. I don't want to engage with those people. and I am very, very clear about on my boundaries of that. There's another woman I know that I recently got to know who very clearly we see things differently. Um, and I have had to say, respectfully, I'm saying it for the fifth time now, let's not talk about this. And she seems to have heard it. And there's so many lovely things about her. There's things I really like about her. And I've
Mhm.
offered to sort of help out in some capacity because we've agreed to disagree. And there's
Yeah.
been a level of mutual respect there of like, it's a potential powder keg of differences that
Mhm.
I'm not interested in going that deeply. There's so many other things in life that we can agree on, that we can like about each other, whether it's our dogs playing or whatever it is. It doesn't. We don't have to force this issue,
Right.
and we don't have to convert people to seeing things from our perspective.
Mhm. It's true. And that is the thing, that if we go in wanting to convince the other person of our viewpoint being right, we're done before we start.
Mhm.
Like you
Yeah.
said earlier, about if you want to be right, you want to be in a relationship. I often say, like, do you want to be right, you want to be happy, or do you want to be right, you want to be loving? Because those are the actions you can choose from. And going in, as you said, generally curious, generally interested, find out somebody's viewpoint and what drives them, where they're coming from, you might discover that their insight and what they're saying for them is absolutely right on, and it's aligned, it's true. And you go, I appreciate where you're coming from, because what happened in your family, this is the reason why you're doing it. I totally get it. Mine's different from that because that's where I come from. And this is the thing. It's not about agreeing with each other. It's about respecting each other.
And understanding, as you said, what I love is understanding where they're coming from. And there's two
Yeah.
things I want to say in here, because one of the disagreements with this woman, or rather her viewpoint and why she is where she is because she had experienced an abortion when she was younger in life, and she had huge regret about it. And
Hmm.
that was her personal experience. And I fully understand that. And I fully support that was her experience, and that her feelings are warranted, and her regret over that situation, making that choice twice, was something she regrets now. Having said that, does she have a right to stop other people from making a choice that is the right choice for them, especially if it's a choice based on health, the health of the mother or the child, a child that can't sustain life on its own? I mean, there are so many factors that go into that situation around abortion. And I think having compassion, having understanding, having like, yes, I can see how you would form this opinion because of your personal experience, but gone through my own personal experience, which was a matter of a child not being able to be life being sustained.
Right.
That that has to be my choice. That can't be taken away from me.
Yeah.
And the other thing is also appreciating that we all do live in these echo chambers. You
Hmm.
know, I have to appreciate that one of my sisters said to me the other day, she went, "You don't watch the BBC, do you? It's so left." And I'm thinking, I don't know what she watches, but I tend to watch the BBC News here because I like to get a little bit of diversity between all the other news channels I watch or
Hmm.
read. And I was thinking, you know, we all probably are both living in echo chambers. We're probably the reason I'm as fiercely where I am and she's as fiercely where she is because that is what we feed ourselves. That's what we listen to.
Hmm.
And another sister lives in Spain this morning. She's writing to me, "Oh my God, the riots in LA, it must be horrific and everything." And I haven't had a chance to call her back and say, "No, it's a mile by mile little block. It's not, LA is not on fire. We are not going through, and it's just, you see, depending on what they're listening to, this skewed perspective
Hmm.
globally. I mean, that's what I'm saying, globally. So I'm getting this information from Spain and from the UK. And
Yeah.
here I'm in LA, or outside of LA. And it's a completely different experience, but it's how it's being represented and how it's being fed to the other side.
And that's the thing, that one of the ways to bridge our political divide is to have a conversation with somebody, because we've been so um, painted by the other side as opposite, that there's no way to cross that bridge. But if we stop listening to those echo chambers and stop listening to those media sources for now, temporarily, and spend time getting to know somebody else who has a different viewpoint, again, you discover how much more you have in common than you do that's separate, because the most of what we have is separate is what we keep hearing and believing in because we've been listening to that particular channel through which this information has come. Left or right doesn't make, it's like, it doesn't really matter which side it is. It's going to drive you against somebody else. And that realization, and this is way back in the Second World War, talked about this, I think First World War too, about the way to power is to divide the people. And so by creating division amongst people who have different viewpoints, it keeps each of us less empowered. So in some ways, bridging our political divides by being willing to discover something about somebody else, not necessarily jump into bed with them, but at least accept and understand them, there's a part of you that becomes realizing that you have a unity, you have connection with them, which makes you stronger, both of you together, even though you have different viewpoints. Because, in wartime, the military, you don't get called up based on their political views. They call up everybody. So people go to war or an occupation where they're doing side by side with somebody else may have extremely divergent viewpoints politically, but they got your back in terms of safety. So it is possible to have relationship, have friendship, to have connection with somebody who has a very different viewpoint from yourself. It doesn't have to be the be all and end all of life.
Yeah. And again, what you're saying there is, is it really is what we choose to focus on. Again, I mean, I live in Malibu. We've been through the fires and everything, and we always come together as community. We are there for each other. We feed each other. We clothe each other. We comfort each other. We do so much for each other. And as I say, I am aware that some of those people that I have come together with to create this place of comfort, warmth, security, of support, that they do have a different political alignment than I have. But we're so focused on what is good and our purpose of coming together. Like you said, you're in the foxhole with somebody, you want them to have your back. You're not just sitting there and argue your political viewpoint while bullets are flying and bombs are dropping. You're not. You are going to focus on how to support each other, and how you both survive this. And so that is what I'm saying. It's like we can keep focusing on what separates us, or we could focus on what brings us together.
Yeah, exactly.
But I want to go back to what you said something earlier, because I am fascinated by that. I mean, I'm recently married, but been together for 15 and a half years anyway. But if I was single, when you mentioned that on dating apps that people are saying, their political position, I have to admit, I would too. I really would. I would be like, let's just not start something off that potentially is not going to work. So how do you feel about that? When you are on dating sites, do you put where your political leaning is, or how do you feel when somebody announces where they're?
Most of the dating apps can let you put in, like, if you're conservative, liberal, that sort of thing. But some people put in their descriptions, their deal breakers, which if you voted for this person, I'm not interested in, don't even reach out to, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a way that can be helpful. The thing is, if that's not in there at all, and you go on a date with somebody and you discover that's their value system, are you going to spend your date trying to convince them otherwise? Or are you going to walk away? At least if it's in the app and it's been communicated right up front, the more transparent the information is, the more reality information is from that person, the more happier I am looking at it, because then I know before I even start if there's any common ground we can start from. Because yes, I want to meet somebody who's got similar political views, because it's a platform we can talk in the same language on. Because I don't know necessarily about the hobbies, because they didn't put them in. They say spiritual. What does that mean? It's like there's more to somebody's makeup than meets the eye. And if they put certain things in their bio which are explanatory, and yes, political part is part of that, it can be a check mark in the positive column or the negative column, so I know whether I want to pursue or not. Like, for me, having been in a relationship with women who are vegan and vegetarian, that's not one of my things. And so sometimes there, like, I remember seeing someone's profile, it was like a vegan, and if you eat animals, I don't want to go out with you. It's like, that's fine with me, because I do.
Yeah.
So for me, it's the same bucket. It's like, what are the disqualifiers and what are the qualifiers? Yeah. And if it's in their profile, it saves me time, frankly.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think it's. I'm laughing now because I'm thinking of a different nephew and his wife. They're now divorced, but she was vegan and he wasn't, and he had to cook his meat in the cellar because there was no way that the smell of
Exactly.
it was going to permeate the house. So yeah, that marriage did not last. But and then on another note, and I agree with you. As we just said, within whether you're the left, there are as you said, that measuring stick, there you could be on a 1 or a 36, depending just within the same political party. There's enough differences in there to navigate, never mind being on completely different ends of the spectrum. And
Right.
I do know a couple right now that um, are politically opposite, and and it was very evident from the beginning. But the one person tried to keep playing down where they were coming from because
Mhm.
everything else about this other person was very attractive to them. So they minimized their beliefs and describe themselves as a moderate so that they could be with this other person. Well, over the course of the last couple of years and elections, it's very clear that they are completely on opposite ends of
Yes.
the spectrum.
Oh yeah.
And now it's like 5 years in, it's like, well, what do we do here? I mean, because the differences are glaringly obvious now, whereas
Hmm.
they were manipulated and downplayed simply because the whole package looked so good that this person tried to pretend they weren't who they where they stood, and it's just caused witnessing it has caused a lot of problems that could have been avoided by simply you know being who you are. Again, it's not about right or wrong. I mean, everybody has a right to their opinion. Everybody has a right to live their life as they see fit. But yeah, be honest about who you are and what your values are and what you believe. It's don't become a chameleon because you think the other person wants to see you in a certain way and then have to fit within that role. It just doesn't work.
No, we talked about authenticity and transparency and honesty so much in the previous episodes. And the reality is, if you pretend to be something you're not to get a relationship, you're doomed to fail
Mhm.
because you cannot keep pretending ultimately because you'll end up falling flat on your face. And you'll also eventually get so triggered and upset and pissed off, you're going to basically launch the other person and they're going to go, what the hell happened? Because you
Mhm.
pretended to be somebody else you're not. And then they don't know any different. And suddenly you become a whole different person. They're going to want to leave as well. So the idea of having a successful relationship under pretense are zero. So don't even bother trying that one. It doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. It's such an interesting time. As I said,
Mhm.
for me, my philosophy is if it doesn't hurt you, why? This whole subject about whether you're woke or not. It's like call people what they want to be called. What does it matter to you?
Yeah.
What does it matter?
Exactly.
What does it matter who loves who? If it's the same sex or the opposite, who cares? It's not your life, it's somebody else's life. Let them define themselves as they wish. Let them love who they want to love. Let them live. Let them have a party, in the
Mhm.
street. And, the argument I heard was, well, would heterosexuals have a party? And it's like, if they want. I mean, it's like nobody's stopping them.
Right.
It's truly just, it's amazing to me how invested we are in things that don't affect us.
Well, the
And it's
thing is, this is the thing.
yeah,
Is oftentimes we identify ourselves by some sort of label that we are not necessarily fully behind. If we only just be willing to trust that who we are is enough without need to have some sort of label or assignment or value system that isn't who we really are and be transparent that way, we'd all get along so much better.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love the what was it, Tim Walls is, mind your own goddamn business. It's
Hmm.
like,
Yeah.
it's an interesting conversation, but yeah, just be true to who you are, be true to who your values, and certainly when you meet somebody, I think in the beginning, but once you're dealing with those like family members or long-standing relationships where it never was an issue before, but it's become an issue now, look for the love, look for the commonality, look for the
Yes.
history, look at the things that you love about that person. Don't focus on this political divide that is happening right now. It doesn't have to end a beautiful relationship. It just doesn't have to.
Yeah.
All right, then. That was another good chat.
Indeed.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll see you all next week. Take care.
See you. Take care.
We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.